Early man settled near Belfast at the Giant's Ring, Ballylesson. In the early map 1570 we see Belfast and Friars Bush graveyard and forests. Another map shows the Forest River flowing down the centre of Belfast. A more recent map shows the church and High Street, shows the market house at Cornmarket, and shows Belfast Castle. Belfast Castle, which is where McDonald's is now, burning in 1708. Fortunately, we still have the Poorhouse at 1774. And I visited the Poorhouse in the 60s and took pictures in the old committee rooms. These are the apartments behind the Poorhouse. The old committee rooms had photographs of some of the citizens of Belfast and the donor boards where people contributed to help the poor. A donor board with a flintlock musket over the fireplace. The flintlock musket was used to guard the graves behind the Poorhouse as grave robbing took place and the bodies being sold for medical purposes to universities. To build the Poorhouse, they had a lottery, and there was 100,000 tickets sold at half a guinea each. The money was kept in this chest as there was no banks in Belfast. Some instructions for the residents. And Belfast was growing very fast. George III was on the throne, and Belfast was quite a rural town, so any pigs that were found roaming about could be taken and killed for the benefit of the poor and the charitable society. And Belfast needed fresh water. The pipes could occasionally be seen when repairs were carried out. They were like long telegraph poles. The water was brought from Leicester's Dam and Upper Malone. This is the powerhouse in the 60s, and also taken from Stranmillis Dam. It could be traced through Essex Street and McClure Street, and at Shaftesbury Square, Donegal Road, quite a lot of wells and the international new waterway running down Dublin Road past the Magdalen Asylum and Donegal Pass. And it came down here to Fountain Street with the fountains. Also notice Castle Court marked, Cornmarket marked, and the Market House marked in this map. And this is the overall map of the watercourse in 1861. Water was also sold from a horse and cart. We had two rivers, the Blackstaff. The Blackstaff flowed down Ormo Avenue and powered Joy's paper mill. This is the outlet into the Lagan from the Blackstaff. Ferry across the Lagan, and the River Farset at Durham Street. There are a number of these little drinking fountains, this one outside the BBC. In the Poorhouse, there's this bust of Mary Ann McCracken, who was a secretary to the Poorhouse. And she kept a journal, so you can read about the young people of Belfast that she brought in and taught spinning, weaving and good manners. A child's coffin at the Poorhouse. Some of the girls were violent. And they were handcuffed. The signature is of Mary Ann's brother, Henry Joy McCracken. They were a Presbyterian family that owned a newsletter. And this is his coat from the Belfast Regiment Volunteers. And they wanted their civil rights, the Presbyterians and Catholics, and so they fought the Battle of Antrim. Henry Joy was captured on the slopes after going up to the Cave Hill and taken here to High Street. This is the High Street view today at Cornmarket. And outside the market house where Mary Ann McCracken and his sister held Sunday school, he was hanged in 1798. And his family paper, the newsletter, carried this report. Mary Ann got his body, brought it down one of the Belfast entries into this house to try and resuscitate it, but it was no use. And so he was buried in a little graveyard at the side of St George's Church in High Street. High Street then flooded from time to time as the Farset was still open, and the graveyard was flooded from time to time. Henry Joy went on the run on the Cave Hill, fathered a child to the woodcutter that he was staying with. Mary Ann learnt about the child after Henry Joy was hung, and she brought the child home and looked after it with her brother Frank. In this house in Donegal Pass. Henry Joy's body was dug up at High Street as it was being flooded quite regular, and his remains were buried with his sister Mary Ann McCracken. This is Rosemary Street Presbyterian Church, and during those times the minister preached with a musket in the pulpit. The redcoats came to arrest him, and he wasn't there. So they rammed his portrait with their sabres, and you can still see the damage in the portrait. Whilst we're in Antrim town, we could look at Antrim Parish Church here and Pogue's Entry, Antrim, and this is where Alexander Irvine lived, and this is his grave in the local church. and he wrote a great little book called My Lady of the Chimney Corner. So that's Alexander Irvine's story. This is a famous Belfast painter, Sir John Lavery, who was born just facing the Poorhouse, and a few yards down from his house, St Patrick's Church here, and this is his triptych, and the Virgin Mary, his wife, Hazel Martin, posed as the Madonna. Another famous Belfast painter was Willie Connor, and he tended to use pastels and certainly captured the local folk. Yet another famous Belfast painter, Paul Henry. And Paul painted in Achill Island on the west of Ireland in County Mayo. A great picture of launching the Curragh. In Presbyterian Church House in Belfast, there are these fine stained glass windows by Wilhelmina Geddes. These were in Rosemary Street Presbyterian Church, and they survived the Blitz. In St Malachy's College on the Antrim Road are these Harry Clark studio stained glass windows. In the 60s was a very tall building, Churchill House, and these were the views of Belfast from the top of Churchill House. At Upper Malone, amongst the very expensive houses of Malone, were these little thatched houses. They have now disappeared, of course. Another old house is the White House at Jordanstown. King William stayed here in July 1690. These old houses were at Millfield, where Castle Court now is, and of course they have disappeared, as has most of the following houses. Fortunately, I kept the addresses of the houses. These houses are now down at Cultraw at the Folk Museum. They were off Sandy Row. This is Torrance Market, where Castle Court now stands. I wonder what happened to the elephant. This shows just how poor people were, and workshops, workhouses were now opened all over Ireland. This is the Belfast workhouse where the city hospital is today, and this is the ladies' sleeping quarters. The beds were just 3 long planks. This is part of Belfast Workhouse today. It's the Gardner Robb Clinic for day patients. And this building has now been demolished. On a visit from Queen Victoria in 1903, the inmates all had a nice cup of tea. On an early map, this one shows the Turnpike Gate at Botanic and Friarsbush Graveyard. So the Turnpike Gate here in this old print, and the stagecoach leaving Donegal Arms Hotel. And this is a view now of the Donegal Arms Hotel. It's now TK Maxx. This is the stagecoach ticket. Belfast to Dublin, which took 13 hours. (1911) and the toll house was here at Bradbury Place. In the 60s, part of it was still here. Friarsbush on the Stranmillis Road, where many of the eminent citizens of Belfast are buried. And just inside the Gate Lodge is this mound called Plaguey Hill, where victims of the plague and cholera, etc., are all buried in this mound. In the 1920s, roadworks was taking place, and the workmen refused to dig through Plaguey Hill. Consequently, the road's very narrow here. Some of the graves tell a very sad story. In this one, 6 children have died, all at an early age. And another one behind the Poorhouse in that cemetery. So another 6 sons are buried here, all at a very early age. The famine affected the west of Ireland greatly, as it was more rural. And this window in the City Hall shows the Poorhouse and digging for potatoes. Belfast avoided the extremes of the famine because of the mills. They were producing so much linen, and there was full-time employment. barber's mill now lies empty. All the machinery was packed up and sent to India. One of the barber's houses is Clanwilliam House. This is now the American Embassy. A great day of rejoicing with the barber's family merging with the Andrews family from Cumber. Another great house here is Strathearn, now Hunter House College. This is at Dunmurry. Yet another house, Rathmore, owned by Victor Coates, a heating engineer, was the first house with central heating in Ireland. This is Rathmore Girls' School. For entertainment, there was the Ulster Hall. The scene of many political meetings, and our star, Ruby Murray, sang here. Another entertainment centre here was the Grand Opera House, with its fine Victorian interior. The best seats in the house. A forgotten entertainment hall is this one, St George's Hall, hidden in at the back of the shops at the High Street. It's now open to the elements. For drinking, there's no nicer spot than the Crown Bar, facing the Europa Hotel, with its nice little snugs. And the Italian tiled bar. Another great interior is here in what was formerly an Ulster Bank in Waring Street. This is now the Merchants Hotel. Belfast linen was exported all over the world, and at Robinson Cleaver's, just facing the City Hall, we have all these figures on the outside of the building, 50 busts showing where the linen was sent to from Maharajas and Sultans to Queen Victoria. This is the City Hall. And a view from the dome of the City Hall up to the Cave Hill. In the 60s, everybody loved the markets, and this was Belfast's main market, Smithfield, where you get anything from a needle to an anchor, or so they said. But then the trouble started, and the market was burnt down. Shops were burned and bombed. Hotels were bombed. People were burnt out of their houses on both sides of the community. And the bombers then hit the centre of Belfast. This is Rob's, a great departmental store. People carried on with their shopping. And the outskirts of Belfast, Lisburn and all the other towns were affected the same way. A steel fence of railings were put round the city centre, and everyone was searched going through the railings. Their handbags were searched. And then on both sides of the community, no-go areas were set up, and the army came in. This is Loyalist Shankill Road. And Nationalists, Albert Street and Falls Road. These were the no-go areas on both sides of the community. A vigilante hut. Well, we have looked at the entries in High Street. We have looked down High Street at the Farset River and the St George's Church. We have looked at the markets, and we've traced Belfast water supply, and we've seen the politics of Belfast, the poor houses of Belfast, and the great Victorian houses of Belfast, and the forgotten music halls of Belfast. So that really is my photographs of Old Belfast, and I hope you enjoyed them. Thanks for watching.